The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. We will not allow ourselves to be slaves again to anybody, according to the President of Kenya, William Ruto. During the meeting in Nairobi, William Ruto looked into the eyes of Emmanuel Macron and said, "We will not allow anybody to enslave the African anymore because we can do things for ourselves." He went ahead to tell Emmanuel Macron and the African that nobody owns us development. And that Paul Kagame even said it, that as Africans, nobody owns us development. We need to develop ourselves, and that we don't have to blame other people for our own mistakes. But this is the time for us to correct that mistakes that we have made for all these decades. And that Africa, we are rich. So before we think of going out to look for money they have kept in measures, the Africans, they have about 4 trillion sitting down. So now they will fund their own project. When we take the infrastructure and other things, we need to utilize this money, take care of ourselves, instead of us moving from one place to the other to be borrowing.
We will not allow ourselves to be exploited again, because we know what we must do. We will not allow ourselves again to be slaves of anybody. We are going to take charge of our own future.
Now, in some ways, we've got to counter the predators of the 21st century, those who want to get their hands on Africa's resources and retain the global market control. So this is something really concrete that we're going to discuss. We have a shared strategy to make sure that Africa is further up the that value chain and can play its full part as a sovereign player.
The continent was a victim of brutal colonialism, all the way to slave trade, exploitation, and everything in between. The Africa Union led in the charge for independence. We now have 54 independent states. You have asked us what assurance we can get that this will not be repeated again. I can tell you without fear of any contradiction that we do not need any assurance from anybody. We will do it ourselves. We will not allow ourselves again, as leaders from this continent, we will take charge of our own destiny. And that is why a conference like this is taking place in Nairobi, because we are recalibrating our relationship with our partners. And we have been absolutely clear that this is a relationship of equals. At the heart of this relationship is sovereign equality. At the heart of this relationship is not extraction, is not exploitation. It is investment for mutual benefit. And we are not entitled. We are not asking, to be favored. No. We are asking that we know we have responsibilities. We also know that others have responsibilities. And the reason why we had a candid conversation this afternoon, even amongst ourselves as Africans, there are things we can do for ourselves. The challenge is when you go and seek for help for things you can do for yourself. We cannot continue that way. And we are saying we are up to the task. Let me give you an example. We had a candid conversation this afternoon that while we go and look for financing our projects using other people's money, we have money in Africa. We have $4 trillion of savings in our pension funds, in our insurance companies, in our reinsurance companies, and yet we are not using that money to fund our own development. The first thing we need to do, and we have agreed with Africa Development Bank, we have agreed with Afri-Exim, we have agreed with Trade Development Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, that before we go and look for money from other people, we must structure our own DFIs to unlock these $4 trillion of our own resources to finance our development. So, we will not allow ourselves to be exploited again, because we know what we must do. And what we are saying is, we don't want to also blame others for our own mistakes. President Kagame told us today that nobody owes us development. We owe it to our own selves. So we mustn't look for favors where we can do it ourselves. Secondly, Aliko Dangote told us today that our own private sector in this continent must first and foremost invest in our continent before we go looking for other investors from elsewhere. Yeah. The question people ask, if our own private sector does not have the confidence to invest in our continent, why would private sector from elsewhere have the confidence? Yeah. If we are not ready to mobilize our own resources here in Africa, resources that are available to us in pension funds, in insurance companies, why would anybody else use their savings to finance our own development? So first things first, we must take the lead as Africans, as policymakers, as private sector leaders in taking charge of our own development. Any other support we get from friends like Macron and other people will be secondary. To answer your question, we will not allow ourselves again to be slaves of anybody. We are going to take charge of our own future. Number two, somebody has asked tangible progress. What tangible progress have we achieved here? And how are we going to approach the G7? Let me say the following, that we have agreed on three fundamental things. We've agreed, number one, is we must develop an innovative mechanism of raising resources at scale, at speed, for our own development, and it starts with us. All we will be asking at the G7, in fact, we will not be asking for money from the G7. What are we asking from the G7? We are asking them to put in call-up capital. We are asking them to put in guarantee, not money. We will use our own institutions to mobilize resources to undertake our own infrastructure development. That's what we'll be going to the G7 to do. Simple. You know, in the past, we've been going to ask for aid and loans and things and more. We are saying there are things we can do by ourselves. Number two, we will be having a conversation as an outcome of this meeting on our human capital dividend. Our young people, the people of this continent, are the greatest asset that we have. They will form the workforce of the future, they will form the market of the future, and they will drive innovation, creativity, artificial intelligence, and technology. So we have one of the biggest assets. What we have agreed is, how do we make that, how do we build the capacity for that asset? Through education, through training, making sure they have access to the internet, making sure that they have access to technology. The rest, the young people of this continent can do it for us and for the globe. And finally, we have agreed on energy transition. That energy transition is not just going to be about energy. It's going to be both transition in development and transition in transformation itself. So energy being, because I have said in my closing statement, there is no region, no country that can industrialize in the dark. We need energy. So these are the three most important things that I see as a take-home from this conference, and I'm very, very proud of the outcome of this conference, and I want to thank my brother Macron for being here with us, using his network to work with us. And we came here as heads of state because we know that first and foremost, it is our responsibility as heads of state in this government to take charge of our own development. My good brother is here as a friend, and we can only leverage on his friendship to be able to get to others so that we can fashion one trajectory for development together. Mr. President.
Merci, Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Really important to have a representative of the African continent there at the G7 when we're talking about international crises to solve, because Africa suffers from these crises as much as anyone else, and too often Africa is left out of these international discussions. Africa has been the most severely struck by the consequence of the war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine because of the cereal and fertilizer imports that have been affected. This caused enormous problems, as well as, and we saw this with the 2022 farm project, and now we're looking into other modalities. And what we see happening with the Strait of Hormuz right now, we see again the primary victims are here in Africa. We heard this from the captains of industry today. We heard it from other stakeholders. The price at the pump and the increase in the price of the barrel have major impacts. And in the terms of the food supply chain, it is, remember, a third of the ships arriving with imports to Africa come through the Strait of Hormuz. And so once again, this is a moral and political failing not to have that representation of the African continent in the G7. And so when we talk about those major global crises, we're going to have to talk about consequences on the African continent. So that's the first issue. Now, the second one about the issue of financial architecture and the need for guarantees, which is what I would call a native issue to the G7. And I discussed this with President Ruto. We want to give a clear message, and that is to calibrate the global imbalance in this regard. The heart of the G7's economic environment, the world in which we are working, is focused on very problematic macroeconomic issues. Overcapacity from China, issues from the USA, European perspectives, and not enough of this gets discussed with Africa's place on the whole value chain, agriculture, industry, you name it. If developed economies do not adhere to that agenda, and that's the first thing, we've got to get them to respect the rules. Secondly, then how would we even be able to hope to make a difference? And so all of the G7 and their partners like India, Brazil, South Korea, and others who are invited to the G7, it's important for all of those countries to adhere to that agenda. And it's not the G7 countries that are mostly doing that. But when it comes to raw material exports, for example, when you look at primary commodities and rare earths, we've got to make sure that Africa is part of the conversation. We have a shared agenda for the G7 and for Africa, which is of great strategic importance. And now, in some ways, we've got to counter the predators of the 21st century, those who want to get their hands on on Africa's resources and retain the global market control. So this is something really concrete that we're going to discuss. We have a shared strategy to make sure that Africa is further up that value chain and can play its full part as a sovereign player. And so that's why we're going to the G7 together, and also because we want to have maximum support among the G7 members for this mechanism for guaranteeing guarantees that we want to expand across the continent. There are some guarantees that already exist that would cover primary losses, and some member states based in the region are already part of that. We've got the African Development Bank, who comes off with one vehicle for everybody. It'll be a Pan-African vehicle, which means that when capital is guaranteed, that means that our infrastructure investments via the African Development Government will be guaranteed, and this will attract more private sector investment because those guarantees will be in place. This is something extremely concrete, very tangible.
We have been slaves for too long, and now they are putting in measures to make sure everything in Africa benefits us, instead of us allowing ourselves to be slaves to other people. But we hope that these leaders, after talking this way, will do the needful, because our leaders are always good at speech. They talk this way and nothing happens. And that is why we see that these people who come into the continent always take advantage of the African, because they know that our leaders will always talk, yet act little. We are seeing the leaders in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso showing the leaders of Africa the path to freedom. Yes, Macron told us, nobody owes us any development. He is not here for our interest. He is there in the interest of his people, and he's right. Why should we sit here expecting people to come into the continent to change the fate of our continent for us? Because this is what they have been preaching to the whole world, how they are here to help us. But we are rich. We have the resources that they need. If we can only unite, if we can only give back their systems to them, the African can take responsibility over everything. It isn't that these leaders don't know the problem of the African. They do. They know the mistakes they are making, and they keep making them after their speeches. William Ruto will tell us this another time he's acting differently. And as Africans, speech doesn't solve situation. As they are busy gathering, looking for opportunity to sign deals, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are doing the needful. As other people are sitting like Nigeria, waiting for other people to come and help them drive Boko Haram, we are seeing our leaders fighting them in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. As Nigeria is allowing people to come and bombard, at the end of the day, nothing happened. Our leaders are doing everything it takes. We know that we are not poor, like he said. We have been slaves to people for a very long time. And it is as a result of the leaders that we have. And that was why Duma Boko said, the leadership is the problem. We have weak leadership, and we need to do away with these kind of leaders for us to have leaders who can be bold to take decisive decisions that will protect the citizens and not the selective few that come into the continent. People come here with their interests, but what do we do at the end of the day? I remember one politician from Namibia where he said that when these people bring their policies and they need to take decisive decisions against them, you then hear the African leader sitting down claiming that if we don't do it, it's going to weaken our relationship. And he was asking, for how long will we continue to be thinking about the relationship with other people and not benefiting ourselves? It is time we have leaders who will know that fighting this battle of freedom, Pan-Africanism and being Pan-Africanist is not in speech, because speech does nothing. But rather, we need a collective force, a unified force using our own internal revenue to solve our own problems. Instead of us moving from one place to the other, taking loans for generations to come and pay. Captain Ibrahim Traore said, they will not leave any debt for generations to come and inherit. This is the language we need these leaders to be speaking, and they can never speak that language in action because of the system. Like Boko said one time, this will cripple you, this will cripple you, this will cripple. The system has been designed in a way that you can never function well if you continue to remain in that system. So until we break away from that democracy, it will be very difficult for these leaders to take decisive decisions. They know what is best in speech, but they cannot take that bold steps. And we hope what they said and the plans they have due will yield fruit. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall. And united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world, in Africa, East Africa, and in Kenya.